Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation for the Arizona Geological Society. The two presenters today are extraordinarily well known in Arizona and Southwest because of their contributions to Southwestern geology. Steve Reynolds is recently named President's Professor at Arizona State University, and he's authored or edited more than 200 geologic maps, articles, and reports, including the Geologic Evolution of Arizona. Steve is a past president of the Arizona Geological Society. And Julia Johnson is geologist and geoscience education researcher. Her geologic research focuses on the geology of Arizona, and her education research involves the use of concept sketches in geoscience learning and teaching. She's a co-author, it turns out she's a co-author on one of our most popular contributed maps here at the Arizona Geological Survey. It's titled Geologic Map of the Phoenix Mountains, Central Arizona. And it has, and I apologize, Steve, I got it wrong earlier, over 60,000 views.
Wow.
I'm handing it off to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, Julie's not a co-author. She's actually the first author of that.
She is the first author. I apologize.
So thanks. Like he said, Julie and I are both faculty members at Arizona State University, and I'm Steve.
And I'm Julia.
And would like to just go through some things and talk. Arizona's got this amazingly spectacular geology, and a lot of it you can see from the highways. And so this talks in kind of two segments, one of which talks about this approach we're taking to doing a new book. And the second part is to pick out a couple of what we think are really special roads in Arizona and to talk about those.
Specifically those true roads, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we were asked to sort of revise the Roadside Geology of Arizona, and it will be out sometime next year. And it has been a fun project to work on, and it's I think it's coming along nicely. It's very different from the other roadside books.
So let's see here. Let's go here. So you've seen these roadside books. There's a whole series. They have them for nearly every state. And when Mountain Press approached us to write a new Roadside Geology Arizona book, we spent a lot of time thinking about what is it about these books that we like a lot. What aspects of these do we think, aren't quite as effective as it could be, and for those who have ever seen our textbooks, Julie and I totally think outside of the box on things. We have 3 textbooks. Geology, earth science, and geography textbooks. And they're not like any textbook anybody had ever seen. They're integrated text and figures and 2-page spreads and a bunch of things that are consistent with how we think people learn. And so luckily, Mountain Press gave us full freedom to do what we wanted. And so they've been really good about us, doing this. Oh, yeah, Julie's gonna mute our video. Thanks. Okay. So let's go here. So would like to start by having you look at this image and think about what you observe, and then think about what the different components of the landscape are. For example, clearly there are layers in here, or actually there are cliffs that are the expression of layers and slopes that are expression of layers, but there are layers in here. But what are the other components? If we were in a classroom, both Julie and I would have you turn to the person next to you and share your observations and interpretations. If you got a cat or a dog, they're good listeners. Otherwise, you just have to, just think about what's here. But we'd like you to look at this for a second, because one of the goals of this book is to teach people how to look at landscapes and how to extract from the landscape the geologic story. So take a look at this for a bit. So when Julie and I look at this image, we see different components. One of the things that you see there, these layers, Mike, I assume you can see our cursor there. So one of these, you can see the layers. In addition to the layers, there are fractures in the rock. So those are 2 components. And when you look at the shape of the landscape, that's kind of another component. There are some layers are forming cliffs, some layers are forming slopes. There are different colors in the landscape from one place to another. And then there's also the orientation of the layers. These layers pretty much look horizontal. And then there's also a big difference between the material that's still attached, is still bedrock, versus all of this loose stuff over here that's accumulating on the base of the slope. And then there's a third bunch of stuff down here that looks kind of sandy. And so one of the goals of this book is to teach people to take a landscape like this, take it apart, and then be able to say, what does this landscape tell us about the history? In this particular case, this is a cliff face that's west of Monument Valley, a little higher up in the section than the Buttes. And the bottom part here, for those who are Arizona geology aficionados, is the Chinle Formation. It's a Triassic unit. And it was formed in kind of swamps and streams and lakes and things like that. Pretty wet environment. And then the climate changed dramatically, and you started getting this unit here, which we call the Rock Point Formation. Some people think it used to be part of the Chinle, but we don't buy that at all. And that's mostly stream deposits. And then anytime you see a big cliffy sandstone with little layering in it, it's almost always windblown sand. And this is the Wingate sandstone of Triassic Jurassic age. Here's the Jurassic Kayenta, and then on the far right is the Navajo. But and the Wingate is windblown sand. So this one little cliff face shows the transition from a really wet time in the Chinle to a really dry time that had basically a big sand, Saharan type sand desert. Anything else?
I just want to say, all these years of teaching, the one thing students wanted to know more than anything else was how to interpret landscapes. We spend a lot of time talking about how you look at landscapes. And so the book that we decided to put together focuses on landscapes.
Okay, so the typical roadside geology book is very road centered, and that's important. We understand it. So you're talking about roadside geology of Arizona, so you got to talk about the roads. But we thought it was really productive to try to approach this from a regional perspective. And so Julie and I thought about what the geology was in different regions and the topography. And so we divided Arizona into a series of regions. Like there's the Grand Canyon region, there's Northeastern Arizona, there's the Painted Desert Mogollon Slope. This area here, the Painted Desert Mogollon Slope, it has really similar geology from place to place. So once you've described it in general, people can see what they're going to see along this road, what they're going to see along this road, what they're going to see along that road, and this road. So you don't have to spend quite so much time on each one of those roads besides the generalities of the region.
So we thought we would start each region with sort of an introduction to that region. And so we talk very briefly in the front of it about, it's just sort of a broad overview that gives hints to what kind of rocks they're going to see and all this spectacular scenery. We decided to take the Northeastern Arizona region for this particular talk because it does have such spectacular scenery. And then we do a slight a summary of the geologic history. And then on the second page, we list some interesting geologic features that we thought a reader would like to know what kind of cool places they're going to see and what kind of features they'll see. And then we jump right into a sort of a topographic features map that shows the location of towns and interesting features, just so they can get sort of a geographical feel for what is in this area.
We always thought it was really frustrating to look at some of the books, not only just the roadside books, but other books, and you're driving by things and you don't even what's the name of that mountain? What's the name of that mesa? What's the name of that canyon? And so we wanted a really clear way for people to have a place to say, oh, let me check. What are the Carrizo Mountains and how do they relate to the Chusca Mountains? Things like that.
Right. And then we jumped right into the stratigraphic section. So it was very important for people who were using the book to understand the region and to understand the relationship of the rocks to each other. And so we chose to have the stratigraphic section be one of the first things that they show up with, brief descriptions about what each of those rocks represent. And then we picked out key units that we thought would help describe the region, or at least prepare people for what they were going to see in the region.
So yeah, so after showing them, what the range of rocks that are possible, like for example, this upper photo in the upper right, it's from the Echo Cliffs, and it's to illustrate the kinds of young deposits. There's young sand deposits down here. There's actually stream deposits in here. And then there's all this young material that's accumulating on the hill slopes. So we just kind of march through from youngest to oldest, each different unit. Like here's the igneous rocks in the region. And then we just keep going down the section: Morrison, Bluff Sandstone, Glen Canyon Group, more Glen Canyon Group, Chinle, and then the Permian rocks of actual Monument Valley. So the idea is that, what's the range of rocks that are possible, and what does each of those look like up front? So that as you're driving, you can say, oh, I think that's Bluff Sandstone by Red Mesa along this highway.
And then we jump right into the geologic map. So we feel like now that the reader knows exactly a little bit about the geology, where is the geology in this region that we've just talked about? And so they can see where the rocks are, and they'll also be able to recognize what kinds of rocks they're going to see as they travel down the roads.
So if this map looks familiar to you, it's the map I compiled when I was at the Arizona Geologic Survey. And it's the version that Steve Richard and I and John Spencer and Phil were authors on. But so it's got a shaded relief base, so you can see a little bit of the topography. And Mountain Press has to make all these maps pretty, like some labels are not in the right place and stuff like that. We'll fix all that. So the idea being that you could look at this map and you say, well, what would I see along this road from Page here to Black Mesa? Black Mesa label's not in the right place. And you say, oh, it's these units. And so, you're just trying to say, what do you see along here? And the advantage, I think, of this regional map, instead of the little strip maps along the highway, it lets you view it a bit more in context. A little strip map in here, you say, well, I've got this little bit of the Cretaceous rocks here capping Black Mesa, but here you can see it's capping a big, huge area. And so we think that's a really useful approach.
And then we have the thing that comes up next is the structures of the region and how they explain how the geology relates to the surface. So we show I don't know, genericized the cross sections.
Yes.
To kind of, we wanted to cover what they would see as along the road, but not necessarily in specific places, unless it was important places like these mesas that we have labeled on these. Those are kind of things that we want people to know about.
And then the next thing is we start talking about geologic structures.
And so we picked out the common geologic structures you see in this place. Like we start off with the sequence of layers, and then we talk about cross beds.
Down here, you probably can't see it at your scale, but those are cross beds.
Those are cross beds. And then the most common feature, joints. And then a little bit about faults, monoclines. And then finally, the last structure we cover are laccoliths.
So again, we're just trying to provide people with examples of what are the typical things you would see in this region.
So we have to talk a little bit about landscape evolution and what characteristics rocks have that produce certain sort of appearances, and how landscapes evolve over time. So we have a series of diagrams or photographs that show how that happens.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll notice, Julie and I are really big fans of what's called integrated text and figures. There's a lot of cognitive research that we learn more if the figure that is being described by the text is right next to that text. It's not like on some other page. And so you can see we don't have big columns of flowing text in these first things. And every photograph has some text, and it's clearly associated with. So in this case, we have layers, and the fact that they're horizontal layers versus these layers which are tilted and how they erode. Again, joints bear a really important aspect. This picture is kind of cool. You can't see it at your scale, but this cliff face is smooth because the joints are parallel to the cliff face, whereas this surface has the joints coming out, and so it looks rough. And so it really is joints that impart a lot of roughness to the figures. And then here's talus slopes. And then these last two are talking about how landscapes evolve over time. For example, in here, you're looking at the cliffs of Black Mesa, and those cliffs are eroding back with time. So what you're seeing in the landscape is just a snapshot of an evolving movie, and we just happen to be in one place in that movie. Or like down here in Monument Valley, this butte here used to look like that. It used to, this was a continuous layer. It was all part of one big cliff. And with time, it erodes, and with a little bit more time, that'll go away, and there'll be just a little red hill here, and that's it. So, and then after we do those things, we basically go straight into the describing the roads. And, you know, we don't need to talk much about the details, but so again, a lot of photos, all the photos referenced with these little arrows. You probably can't see at your scale. And we go through it. And then, you know, there are interesting things that we want to describe as kind of separate topics. And so we break those out with a little special topics boxes like that. Here's another one, some cross beds, Grand Canyon, White Mesa, that area. And again, you know, talking about some of the special things. So would like to stop and take a break there. And if anybody has questions or wonders about what the heck we're doing, please feel free to do that.
Steve, do you want any help with the chat questions, or can you and?
Yeah, we're not looking at the chat at all. So if you
okay. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, there's 24 comments in the chat. So
well, pick a few of them.
Yeah, let me pick one or two that.
And mostly pick the questions rather than the attaboys. Okay. Or you guys are crazy, you know.
Hang on a second. I'm moving forward on that.
I mean, you could do some of those too, but so yeah, you know, if we can answer questions, that's probably the most helpful thing we could do.
Well, it looks a number of the questions are, is this going to be available after for viewing after this event? And the answer to that is yes. You've given us permission to do that.
Yes.
I don't see a lot of explicit questions regarding.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going then. So
okay.
As they come in, I'm happy to answer them. We'll go back to being in stealth mode. You guys are actually lucky, because Julia goes to bed at like 5:30 and gets up at 8:30. So she would rather be at home with her cats right now, but she's not. So yeah.
Hey, Mike has a question for you.
Okay.
I like the illustrative or integrated approach. Would a comic book format work?
A graphic novel, Roadside Geology. I don't know. Yeah. No. Mountain Press has very specific rules about page sizes and things like that. Mm-hmm. This book, oh, somebody's writing on it. I don't know who's writing on that.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, interesting. But Mountain Press says, here's how big the book's going to be. You know, all their books are all the same size. And so for this book, like the textbooks that Julie and I have, we do all the layout ourselves. So everything you've seen, Julie and I did the layout of. Because you're trying to write text around figures, and it's all got to be done in one place. So okay, well, we'll keep moving here. And Mike, if you can figure out how to get rid of the annotations, those yellow marks.
Yeah, I don't have a clue, to be honest with you. I didn't put them in. I will try and resolve that issue. They are showing up again and again.
I got it. It says clear all drawings. Do it.
Oh, you know where that's at? You did it?
I just found it.
Okay, good. Thank goodness one of us is on top of this.
Yeah. Okay, so the two roads we want to talk about. Yeah, we gotta mute that. Thank you. The two roads we want to talk about. One is the road from. Oh, go back to just a pointer. Don't erase anything. Okay, thank you. Okay. So one of the roads is this road that goes from Tuba City, and this is Chinle. The label got moved, and this is Black Mesa. The label got moved. Kayenta, Mexican water, and I guess you need to mute something, Mike. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, and I apologize. I don't know who it is. Would everybody check to make sure that you're muted, please?
Make sure you're muted. Somebody's eating, drinking something, or kissing cats or something. I don't know. Oh. So
I
anyway,
don't see. Okay, go ahead.
So this is one of the this is one of the roads that we wanted to talk about, and it's in Northeastern Arizona. So this is the Utah borders, the top of this one here. So we wanted to go through this. So we don't want to talk in detail because we're going to show you some of this, but this road has really cool stuff along it. There's one of the most beautiful exposures of Chinle. There's dinosaur footprints. There's these really cool things here that we'll describe in a second. And Black Mesa, which has a lot of coal. So there's actually some old artifacts from when they were mining coal there, and some other things. Navajo National Monument is along the way. And then, and the other thing we're doing, we tried to break these into segments so that, because some people will drive from Tuba City to Kayenta, and then they're going to go north to Monument Valley and leave US 160. And other people may say, hey, I want to drive to Durango. And so you're just going to still be on the road from Kayenta to the Four Corners. So we tried to segment it so that you could kind of pick and choose the segments you go. The only awkward thing about how we've done some things is sometimes along a road, you go from one region to another, but we think people can figure that out. So anyway, so a variety of things here. We're going to show you some of these pictures here. So let's just take some time looking at a few of these images. So this is the Chinle. This is just after you leave the road, US 89 from, you know, I'm not good with numbers, but I've had to learn these highway numbers. Oh, man. So you leave at US 89 and you turn off on 160 and you climb up a hill just east of that junction. And there's one of the most beautiful exposures of Chinle in here. It's pretty high in the Chinle section. And all these white layers in here, the people have debated what those white layers are. They're carbonate, limestone, calcium carbonate. And some people think that they're showing you that there are little lakes in here. Other people think that they're essentially soil horizons. I think in this particular case, most of these things are essentially soil horizons. They're all like buried caliche zones, things like that, but Triassic, so 220 million years old. And we now know the age of these rocks pretty well. Nancy Riggs at NAU has been dating detrital zircon grains, and George Garrels did too. George did it first, actually, in the Chinle, and we can tell that these rocks are about 220 million years old. Maybe and locally younger, but a lot of them are about that age. And then here's a close-up of just not very far from that, near the little town of Moenavi. There are some dinosaur footprints, really good ones, and you can just kind of drive off the road there and see them. They've got some little stalls to sell Native American jewelry and things like that. And they're usually guys around that want to show you around, and they know where the good tracks are. They point out some other things that are not dinosaur tracks, that are really big circular things, like 2 meters in diameter. But they're really nice dinosaur tracks. You can see the claws and things like that. In this case, I poured a little water in these to highlight them a bit. But it's actually a trackway, so you can see kind of how far apart it was from one step to the next, get an idea how big these creatures were. And then this is a really cool little place right by the road. It's called Elephant's Feet. And people have had a lot of disagreement about what this unit is. when the USGS was in here, they named a unit the Cal Springs sandstone for Cal Springs. It's not very far from these elephant feet. They're probably a little closer to Tonley, but they're pretty close. And so they named it a unit the Cal Springs sandstone. And then over the next 30 years, there was a lot of disagreement. You know, was the Cal Springs, is it in the Morrison? Is it in the San Rafael group? Is it Bluff Sandstone? What the heck is it? Entrada? What is it? And it's one of these cases where it's a complicated stratigraphic situation. But I think most people now think that these elephant feet are little remnants of bleached Entrada sandstone, which is Entrada is the unit that makes all the arches at Arches National Park. But so Entrada with, you know, something like Carmel underneath it, all Middle Jurassic in age, one way or the other, but pretty cool little features. Along this road for a whole bunch of it, you go by Black Mesa. And Black Mesa is a mostly Cretaceous section. There's a little bit of Jurassic Morrison down here at the bottom. And then Dakota Sandstone, big expanse of gray Mancos Shale. And then these upper units is called the Mesa Verde group, named after Mesa Verde over by Cortez, Colorado. And the Mancos is a marine unit. It represents a time when you had a big bunch of seas come across the interior of the U.S., Western U.S., and it's called the Cretaceous Interior Seaway. And so they're marine fossils and stuff in here. And then these rocks above it are mostly like shoreline facies and swamps and things like that. They're actually coal deposits up in this stuff. And there were 2 coal mines up on top. One of them that shipped the coal to the Page, Navajo generating station at Page. And they don't do that anymore. And another one that shipped it to Bullhead City, but had to use water to put it in a pipeline and ship it as a slurry. And the people living in the region obviously were not very happy about all their water being sent down a pipeline to Western Arizona. So they don't do that anymore. But interesting to, you know, it's a classic case where the Dakota is the seas coming in, and that was a beach deposit. And then the seas were here to deposit the Mancos, and then the seas went back out, and that's what deposited the Mesa Verde group. So again, here you have a nice place to say, what's the sequence of events that are expressed in the actual landscape? And they're cute little hidden things along the way too. This is the upper part. This is the lower part of the Morrison, Jurassic Morrison, Middle Jurassic, and sitting on top of it, actually late Jurassic, and sitting on top of it is the Dakota Sandstone. And elsewhere in the region, there's a whole bunch of rocks on top of this lower Morrison. You know, all the rocks that kind of look like the Chinle, they're modeled and they're slope forming. There's a ton of that stuff. It's the brushy basin member of the Morrison. This is the saltwash member. And so there's an unconformity in here, and it represents a bucket load of time between, you know, something in here that's maybe 100 million years old, 110 for the Dakota, versus this stuff down here, which is 150 million years old. And this unconformity, as you track it south, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. By show low, these rocks here sit on Pennsylvanian and Permian rocks. So you've cut out all the Triassic, all the Jurassic, and finally that unconformity has gone all the way down. So really, but it's kind of hidden in here. It's kind of in the weeds to some extent. You have to say, do I know what I'm looking at? So there are places in here where we know that the average reader of these books isn't going to recognize what's in there. And so we take that and we describe it. And so that would be one of the things that we actually describe as a special topic, this unconformity. And then one of my favorite folds in the whole world is the Organ Rock Monocline, just west of Kayenta. And so the units are coming over here and they fold down, and there's this unit is Triassic Jurassic Wingate, and then there's ledges of Kayenta, and then these flat irons, as they're called, of Navajo sandstone, which is also early Jurassic, but higher in this section. So there's Wingate, Kayenta, Navajo in here, and then a bunch of recent stuff in the foreground. But just with the right light, This is just a beautiful fold structure. And then not along this road, but visible from this road is Agatha Peak. And it's an igneous center. Most of these things, they're not volcanic necks in the true sense of it, in that they were inside the volcano. Most of these things were places where the magma hit groundwater and you had a catastrophic explosion and you made a pit crater, a maar on top of it. And then the lava, solidified in the conduit, but below the surface. Wasn't any like built up volcano around this thing. And then eventually you erode down through the surface, and the volcanic conduit is more resistant than the soft rocks around it. And so it does this. So there's different things that people have called volcanic necks, but these really aren't the kind of volcanic neck that your grandmother saw. And then again, you don't go through Monument Valley from this road, but it's off in the distance. And a lot of people that take this road are going to Monument Valley. And Monument Valley is mostly Permian rocks. So this is the Permian Deshay sandstone. We've been doing some detrital zircon work in these things to tell how you correlate the Deshay to things like the Supai and the Coconino. And then below that's the Oregon Rock Shale, which is clearly a hermit equivalent. And then below that here at the bottom is Cedar Mesa sandstone. So, all Permian rocks. So there's an uplift called the Monument Uplift, and that shows up on the geologic map, that you have this little kind of window through into older rocks, and they're monoclines and tilted areas around it that bring these rocks up to the surface. And then here's one of those monoclines. This is the Comb Ridge monocline. This is actually just barely into Utah. And if Steve Simpkins on this call, he knows where I took this picture from. And this is a really beautiful fold structure. This is the Comb Ridge monocline. And here's the San Juan River in here. And it just really nicely illustrates that here's the Monument Uplift, kind of off in this direction off here to the left. And these rocks then are folded down. And so you have higher rocks like the Navajo sandstone over here in the downfolded part. So another road we wanted to talk about is this road. It's probably the most beautiful highway in Arizona. It's a Navajo Highway 12 or Route 12, and it goes from Window Rock and it goes into New Mexico. Sorry, we still describe it when it goes into New Mexico. And then it comes back out and goes into Round Rock. And then you can continue on this road all the way up to Mexican Hat where you join the main highway. But it's a gorgeous little road. And so there's, you're kind of around. Here's Hunter's Point, the photo that was on the title slide. There's Window Rock. There are lots of examples of how you're trying to make arches and windows and things like that in these rocks. And there are igneous features, both volcanic layers like lava flows, as well as some of these weird maar deposits. And then we'll talk about a couple of these things. Oh, and where we can, we talk about the resources. And so this is a case where you're looking at the Lukachukai Mountains, and it has Arizona's biggest oil field. It's not a very big oil field, but it's what we got. And also they mined uranium in the Morrison up in the mountains there. So this was an area that there's a lot of energy resources in there. So we wanted to show you just a few of the nice images here. So this is the Hunters Point monocline. This is the most beautiful fold in Arizona. I like the Oregon Rock monocline, but I'm afraid Hunters Point is really great. And it's Supai and Pennsylvanian Permian Supai and Permian Deshay sandstone, and then higher units as you go around the corner here. But it's just a beautiful tight monocline. This monocline is called the East Defiance monocline because it defines the east edge of the Defiance Uplift, which is a big area up by Canyon Deshay. Again, it's obvious on the geologic map of the region what that is. And here's Window Rock, for which the Window Rock community is named. It's a big hole in a fin of Entrada sandstone. To get a window like this, you kind of have to have a narrow fin of rocks. Usually that's defined by joints. You can see one of those joints in here. And then, big pieces fall off on both sides. And finally, you got a thin enough fin of rock that you can erode through it and make a window. And then this is one of the best named features in Arizona. It's called the Beast. And it's one of these igneous features that's, it was a conduit as the magma came up through it, it encountered groundwater. And so as you look at these rocks, they're all pieces of things. And it was just a very explosive event along the East Defiance monocline. So you've got this igneous feature, as well as you've got these beautiful exposures of the East Defiance monocline. This is just a great road. Along this road, a little off of it, is Canyon de Chelly. And, here's Spider Rock. And the legend is that there was a spider that lived up. This is what the Navajo elders would tell their kids, is that there's a spider that lived up here. And if kids were bad, the spider would take them up here and eat them. And the light colored top are the bleached bones of the children. So a little motivation there for studying. And then one of the most beautiful mountain fronts in Arizona is the Lukachukai. And so this is like north of Canyon de Chelly on the way to Round Rock. And you have Chinle down here at the bottom. You have Rock Point Formation. You've got the Wingate Sandstone. Remember, anytime you have a big cliffy sandstone with almost no layers in it, it's almost always a windblown sand. Wingate in here is a windblown sand. There's actually not Navajo in here. It kind of has thinned out and gone away to nothing. And then some Cayenta on top of it, and then some Morrison, and then some Chusca sandstone, which is an early tertiary rock. And then in some places, not necessarily here, but you have some igneous rock sitting on top. But it's just a beautiful place. But this whole road, if you ever get a chance to take that road, Navajo 12, it's a great place. That's what we have. We're glad to take questions.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, I suppose we can open it up and people can address their questions directly to Steve and Julia if you all like.
Yeah, maybe have them raise their hand and you can unmute them, or they can.
Okay. We'll see about that.
Yeah,
I'll do my best.
They can people can just raise their hand and then unmute themselves, I guess, or just do it. However you want to do it. We don't care.
So someone should get us started.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
It would seem that Northern Arizona is a good place to start. Did you find it more challenging to try to describe the terrain of Southern Arizona because the units are more discontinuous or broken up?
Yes. Yeah. Northern Arizona it makes it easier to understand the geologic principles. So we started with the Grand Canyon, because a lot of people buy these books because they're going to the Grand Canyon. We're sorry. And then we do Northeastern Arizona, because we thought those were the clearest places that you can kind of talk about the sequence of events and things like that. We can do this in Southern Arizona, but of course, it's a lot of it's more complicated. And a lot of it, you can't. Some of it you can tell from a distance pretty easily, like Chiricahua National Monument, you can say, what's in there? Or other places like, Cochise Stronghold. But, once you get into Santa Rita's, it's a little harder. Patagonia's, it's a little harder. So yeah, we definitely think that you kind of ease people in by starting from the Colorado Plateau in general, and then moving farther south. And so the plan for the book is to go from the Colorado Plateau to the transition zone and then to the Basin Range. So you've saved the hardest part for last. But on the other hand, the book is set up that you're just going to be able to access wherever you are. You say, oh, I'm going to drive this road, and you just look it up and you go. So it's not like you have to read a bunch of stuff. The only thing that we think will help readers is if they read the regional introduction that Julia described for that region first before they go into the road. Because once you're into the road, we're talking about geologic units and, oh, this is the McCoy Mountains Formation, or this is the Escabrosa limestone. And so, but all of those have gotten introduced with pictures in the regional introduction.
Excellent. Someone else?
This is Justin Clark. I have a quick question. So in terms of the Colorado Plateau, the Northeastern Arizona area, how deep does the geology go in terms of, because I guess the bottom of the Grand Canyon probably doesn't even go down to the bottom of the units. So is that how far down do you go? Just where it's visible on the surface, or?
We mostly where it's visible on the surface. Once in a while, we'll describe what we think is at depth. Like in Northeastern Arizona, yeah, there's some studies that people have done of inclusions of Precambrian basement in the igneous rocks and things like that. But we're not going there. We really want to emphasize what people can see at the surface.
Right.
Karen Wenrich has a question. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi, Steve. You mentioned on the igneous features, as you call them, in the minets and manchakites, that they were just simply solidified as they came up. But if you look at Gene Shoemaker's old papers, you'll find that they had Mara lake sediments over top of them. So you didn't mention that. So are you disputing what he had said, or?
No, we agree with all that stuff. Yeah, we didn't talk about it here, but the point we were trying to make is that a lot of people look at something like shiprock and they say it's a volcanic neck. And if you look at the geology of shiprock, it's all fragments. And so, and there's layers, inward dipping layers and things like that in a lot of these features, like some of the ones south of shiprock. And so you can see that they were basically explosive cones, like, opening up like this, and the stuff came down and filled it back up. And that's why the stuff is tilted in from all sides. So we're just trying to make a point that a lot of the things that people in the past have called volcanic necks aren't really the conduit inside of a volcano. Here's the volcano and here's the conduit inside. A lot of people think that's what a volcanic neck is. You rode the volcano away. These were volcanic conduits, but they had, the land surface was up here and there was no volcano that was constructed on top of it. They were just, like you said, Mars and little lakes and things like that. And
I guess I always think of a Mars as being sort of part of a volcanic eruption. And I know Gene always used that to describe the process of fluidization, the explosiveness. And I think that was a definition.
We agree with that. We think Mars are essentially a crater formed by a volcanic explosion, generally because the magma hit groundwater. And so it was what people call a phreatomagmatic explosion.
Right. Well, that's how Gene always described it.
We don't disagree with Gene on that.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, Will and Pam Wilkinson here. A question, the photos are incredible. From a geologist's point of view, you can begin to make out where you're tracing units and that sort of thing. In the book, are you going to have contact lines so it's pretty clear to someone who is not very geologically oriented of what you're talking about?
We have had that discussion. I would say it's not fully resolved what we're going to do with those. What we've thought about is having, we think the photos, there's so many photos that because we're trying to show a photo of each unit, for example. And so to some extent, we don't feel like we have to annotate those because we say the middle cliff here is Navajo sandstone. So we're very specific from those photos about what the units are in that photo. So we don't feel like we have to do it there. But we plan to, in the introduction to the whole book, do a lot of that. And we've talked about doing some of that selectively for the region. We're trying to do most things as 2-page spreads. So you open it up and you say, okay, there's the structures, here's the landscape evolution. And so if we do that, it's a couple pages of those kind of annotated photographs. But yeah, we've worried a lot about that issue and haven't exactly decided what we're going to do with it. But it's a good idea.
We really like the maps, and we just we just went to Page like last weekend, so we were in the area that you're talking about, and you kind of, again, from the geologist's point of view, you can kind of figure it out, but from the layman's point of view, how hard is it going to be?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think where it helps is because right up front we say, here's what this rock unit looks like. Here's what this rock unit looks like. And so as they go along, they can say, oh, remember that kind of looks like that Chinle rock. So, but yeah, there are places like Echo Cliffs, but in Echo Cliffs, we describe the sequence. We say the lower slope former is this. And so, it's a trade-off between annotating it well enough that somebody who's totally a novice can figure it out versus the lines start to get in the way of looking at the scenery.
Yeah.
And so that's a trade-off that we've wrestled with.
Steve?
Yes.
I've got a question. I used your textbook, a couple of editions, when I was teaching a community college class. And one of the things that you had in there were challenge questions. And so I'm wondering, are you going to use any kind of professorial element where you have questions, what to think about in this photo, where you ask a question rather than tell the story?
We plan on doing some of that in the introduction to the whole book. These books, we have these regions, and each region has an introduction, but there has to be an upfront discussion of geologic processes and things like that. And so where we do that kind of look at this landscape, like we did at the very start of this talk, we do that in the introduction to the book. And because we want people to take the time to stop and look. And so, but to do that, they need to be nice big photos. So they might have to be turned sideways in the book so you can hold the book up and see the whole thing.
Thank you.
Thanks for using our book, by the way.
Yeah, the students enjoyed it.
We don't know why everybody doesn't use it, but that's
oh, here's a question from Sally Clement to you guys. Did you use information or photos from the Arizona Survey Geology for Everyman series in your new version? I'm not sure what to make of that.
I'm not sure what to make of that either. All the photos are mine.
Yeah.
Some are Julia's. None of the ones we showed you today are Julia's, but she's got some in here as well. And so one of the fun things about doing this is we had to take a road trip, like day trips, and say, well, we need to drive to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and photograph everything along the way. And I have a really good camera, and so we're just taking pictures as we go. I mean, like this image here, I just happened to be there at the right time of day, and this is Desert View in the Grand Canyon, and you can see the Paria Plateau in the distance, and I mean this. So yeah, and we've tried to make the photos as big as possible, with the trade-off that you're trying to show a photograph of everything you're talking about. I mean, that's what we do with our textbooks, is if we're talking about something, there has got to be a figure for it.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have a paragraph about something, it just goes away. But if you say, we're talking about this kind of fault, here's a picture of this kind of fault, then you say, okay, I can see that. So
how many photos do you have in this? Are you going to end up with in the book?
A ton. You saw that every page has got a couple photos in it.
Okay.
Sometimes 4, sometimes 3. Yeah, it's good. It has a ton. Luckily, I have a ton.
Very good. Any other questions before we should let Steve and Julia get back to their evening?
Yeah, so this is Will and Pam again. Are all the photos going to be in color, Steve?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And Julie and I have pondered, this is to be negotiated with Mountain Press. We would like to have like a website or something that has all of these photos in it.
Yes.
But that's a Mountain Press copyright kind of, I mean, they're my photos and stuff like that, but we would like to have some kind of companion website. Now, what Julia really wants us to do is to You want to describe what you want to do?
Well, I really wish that Steve would get some drone footage and stand in front of outcrops and do
Oh, nice.
blogs or
Yeah.
whatever you call them.
Yammering.
Yammering.
Is what you sometimes.
And then upload those as part of the book.
Yeah, so if somebody's driving along, they can say, I want to hear about baby rocks, or I want to hear about elephant feet,
Yeah.
But so there are options there. So.
And Mountain Press isn't really interested. Bless their hearts for letting us go off on a limb after the regimented way they do textbooks, but they are pretty limited, I think, in what they're willing to do beyond the print matter.
Yeah, but they've been wonderful with us. I mean, like Julia said, this is so outside the box compared to the normal roadside geology books. But we think that after somebody has gone through this book, they're going to know a ton about the geology of Arizona, because you can just say, oh, this region has this, and those are the rocks, and we just are really optimistic, and we're thrilled with how this book looks, frankly.
Steve,
it's still evolving.
I've got another question for you. It's a cautionary question. I use the Mountain Press books quite often in different states, and in Utah, a lot of the Mesozoic units are shades of green, and the shades of green are not distinctive. And so when one is using those maps, it gets confusing trying to tease out the units. So maybe rather than just using color, they can use color with symbol. But that's a flaw in that Utah book in particular.
Okay, yeah, no, we know that's an issue.
Yeah.
In our case, we want the colors on the cross sections to match the colors on the geologic map. But we do have labels on the map. Every big outcrop of something is going to have labels on it. And those maps are still to be, and the cross sections are still to be drafted by Mountain Press. We're just doing it ourselves and giving them something to start with the graphics. But they look good from our standpoint. We know that Mountain Press is going to make the labels, the rock unit labels, be more visible, and put the text in a little bit more elegant way than we've done it. But we're just pushing along.
Steve, a number of people want to know when they can buy the book. When's it going to be out?
Well, that was Mountain Press's fear about us giving this talk. We're going to get a whole bunch of emails where we want to buy this new Roadside of Arizona book. And, I would say look for it before the next GSA. That's what we're shooting for. Now, whether it happens like that, but we would like to see this book out next year.
And remember that Steve wears rose-colored glasses.
Absolutely.
True.
I mean, we'll do our best, but yeah. So.
Yeah. I'm one that is always optimistic about how long it'll take to do things, and often I'm wrong. Yeah.
So Steve, any idea what the cost might be?
It'll be the same as all their other books. I don't know what those costs are. You could go on their website and look. Yeah, I don't know. We're not paying any attention to that, frankly. We're just trying to do a book that's really fun and helps people learn stuff. And also the other thing, one of the goals is after they've used our book and they've learned all these strategies about how to look at landscapes, then those other books like the Utah book or the New Mexico roadside geology books, those will be a lot more understandable by them, because they'll say, oh, that's what they mean by that. But even though those other books don't go into the kind of detail that we do, trying to teach you how to look at things and trying to specifically go unit by unit through things. I mean, in every region, we have, 3 pages, sometimes 5 pages of photographs of units, because we want a photo of every unit that we think is key and important.
Well, I think you sold 100 copies today, Steve, so that's pretty good.
I was going to say, I'm really excited based on all the comments that I'm seeing. People wanted it for Christmas, so.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll all write to Mountain Press tomorrow.
Yeah. But like I told Michael, I think I've taught my last in-person class at ASU. And so I'm going to have a lot of time to work on this, and Julia as well. So
Very good. Hey, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
we're
having us.
glad to be able to help you out at the last minute like this. So it was good.
It was fun.
All right. Thank you.
I
And
think we
thanks
had a
everybody
record
for joining us.
participation at about 150 people. So yeah, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Enjoy your holidays.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Did I?